Hi, this is Walter Weesey with Yellowstone Country Fly Fishing and Parks Fly Shop with my slightly belated weekly fly tying video for the 16th of April 2019. This one's coming out about 10, 12 hours late because I was tying flies at the Salt Lake City Wasatch Fly Tying Expo this weekend and just getting everything unloaded from the car and so forth. I didn't have time to shoot the video yesterday for upload this morning. But anyway, what I'm doing here today is a fly called a Zirdle or Zirdle bug. And as the name and the appearance of the fly should suggest, this is a combination of a zonker and a girdle bug. And it's a very, very hot fly here in southwest Montana right now. Kind of splits the difference between a stonefly nymph, a crayfish, and a bait fish, like a sculpin or some other form of bait fish. And there are some other videos of this pattern on YouTube, but they're all sort of variations on it, except in terms of color, in which this is sort of an unusual one. This one I'm doing here is actually sort of the stock version. If the company that I think originated this fly is Solitude Fly Company, and this is effectively, almost identical to how they tie it. Some of the other variations are, a little different, probably work the same, but I just was kind of surprised I didn't really see a standard Zirdle on YouTube, and so I figured I'd tie one. Okay, so my hook here is going to be a 3XL streamer / nymph hook, kind of your standard bully bugger hook. And I'm going to weight that. Normally I would probably use lead wire on this one for use outside Yellowstone Park because it is a fairly buoyant fly with that big rabbit strip on it. But I'm all out of 035 lead wire, and so I'm using 035 non-toxic, which is I think probably tin soldering wire. I'm going to kind of heavily weight that shank like so, and then go ahead and start my thread right here at the front of the fly. And then I'm going to kind of cross over that lead or that tin wire to lock that into place. Now, if I was tying this in sort of the non-standard, one of the non-standard or modified versions, I would probably be tying it on a jig hook with a bead head, in which case I would just wrap that lead on the hook, that tin on the hook, and then shove it into that bead head, and I'd be all set. Alright, so the next step here is to add my tail. And the tail on this one is going to be, 6 or 7 strands probably of root beer crystal flash. And I'm going to tie that in here. By the way, my thread is 6/0 light brown. And it doesn't, again, I mean, this is more of a generic recipe for the pattern. And so you can tie it whatever colors you like. Sort of brown and gold are popular, olive's popular. Your sort of crayfish colors are popular. So I doubled that flash over itself and tied it back down again, and so I've got about twice as much flash there as when I started with, and I cut that a little bit shorter than the hook shank. Now the body on this fly is going to be sort of I think this is amber stone New Age chenille. The standard pattern would typically use just a standard brindle chenille. On this kind of colorway, the kind of light colored crawfish version I'm doing here, like a yellow and brown or kind of tan and brown brindle chenille would be fairly standard, but I kind of like this stuff better than your standard brindle chenilles. So I'm going to tie in that chenille there. I'm going to come forward slightly here, and now the legs on this fly, you could use whatever kind of rubber leg sort of material you'd like, and what I'm using is this barred rubber, and I'm actually using rubber on this one. You'll see why in a moment. And it's kind of barred orange on one side and then barred chartreuse on the other. So I'm definitely kind of going for the sort of a tractor crawfish, if you will, colorway. You could certainly tie this in smaller sizes, or larger sizes for that matter, and I think it'd make a great warm water fly, a good smallmouth fly, in addition to being a good trout fly. So what I've done there is cut that two-strand rubber in half, and I'm going to tie that in using X-wraps. Now this pattern, you could do it with the standard kind of girdle bug I typically use 2 or 3 individual legs secured. This one, more typically, you're going to tie it with, or at least this sort of stock pattern is more commonly tied. You tie in 2 legs at once and then separate them later on. And this other pair of legs just came apart on me, but that's no big deal. I'm just going to tie them in together. And by the way, thanks to everybody who came and said hi at the Wasatch show. That was actually my first show I'd ever tied flies at, so I learned a few things. I think next year I'm going to make sure to have more stuff to sell. I was hoping to book a bunch of guide trips, and I got a little bit of interest, but not as much as I would have hoped. Okay, so then take one more strand of that, and then I'm going to, and this is actually the half strand left over from when I tied the sample fly. I'm going to come in here and secure that pointing out the front here. And on the sample, I actually did it last, which resulted in kind of an ugly head, and so I actually changed the order I'm tying this from the sample fly. Okay, and now I'm going to do something kind of unusual here, which is I'm going to spiral that thread back to the chenille there, and I'm going to go all the way back to that chenille. And then, before I do anything else, as usual, I'm going to put some head cement on my X-wraps that are securing those rubber legs. And now, what I'm going to actually do here is take that bobbin and just hang that from my materials clip back there. I'm going to come in with another bobbin, exactly the same thread, and start that at the front. And so I've actually got 2 bobbins working right now, and you'll see why in a moment. Now my next step here is to wrap that chenille forward. And you'll notice maybe at this point, and I'll show it in a moment, I actually have my thread behind the first wrap of chenille there, and that's very unusual. Typically, any kind of thread or wire or what have you, I would want to have a wrap of the body material behind it to keep it from sliding down the back of the hook. But I'm actually going to use that first bobbin that's hanging at the back of the hook there to secure the rabbit strip at the back, and I want that all the way back, and that's why I'm doing that. Like I said, this would be actually quite a bit easier to tie if I was using a jig hook, because I wouldn't need to secure that rabbit at the back of the hook. I just poke the hook through it. Okay. So right now I've got kind of a thing that looks more or less like a girdle bug, except with a crystal flash tail. And then here's where that changes. I've got sort of a tiger barred rabbit strip here, and frankly it's not a very good rabbit strip. Cut that there. And so it's kind of a pale orange, tan, with black barring rabbit strip there. I'm going to come in at the front and just cut that to a bit of a point, just to make that easier to tie in. I'm going to try to catch that right by the point, and it's going to probably take a few thread wraps. Come on. It's always the hardest part when you're tying with rabbit, is to actually capture the tip of the rabbit. Okay, there we go. And now I'm wrapping back towards the body on that and kind of getting tighter and tighter as I go there. And then I'll go forward here. Take a couple turns in front of those rubber legs just to clear the eye a little bit. And I'm going to whip finish in front of the rubber legs. Alright, so that second bobbin I tied in is done. Now I've just got my rabbit strip hanging off the back of the fly here, and obviously that's not going to work. So what I'm going to do here is kind of moisten that rabbit, maybe use a tip of my scissors or a bodkin to kind of get those fibers separated right at my thread at the back of the hook there. And you don't have to be perfect with this. But I'm going to stretch that kind of tight, because it will stretch a little bit when it gets wet as well. And I'm going to come in and just start making wraps right in behind, or right in at that separated fur. And yeah, you're going to have some thread kind of hanging loose at the back of the fly here, but the fish really, really don't care. Okay, and so my final step here, because I'm at the back of the hook here and I've got this rabbit hanging here, it's going to be really hard to do a good whip finish. So I'm not going to do a whip finish. What I'm going to do is get my super glue and I'm going to coat that thread pretty liberally, and I'm going to do a glue knot here. Some guys like to do this as like their only method of, they never use a whip finish. I don't do that very often, but in this instance, that's the best way of doing it. And so I'm just kind of holding that thread tight. The glue I wrapped over itself there, I'm holding that thread tight to let it kind of set to itself. And then once I figure it's about done, I'll cut it. And one thing I'm going to do here is come back in and put a little bit more glue on there. Trying to keep it out of the hair as much as I can, but if a little bit gets into that hair, that's not going to be too big of a problem either. And then I'll go in, since I've got a rubber leg right there at the front, I don't want to use super glue at the front of the fly. I'm just going to put some head cement there on my forward thread wraps. And there you have it. That is a Zirdle bug. And I'm going to trim this just a hair. I'm going to trim that strip about even with the end of the crystal flash there. So that's a Zirdle bug. You can fish this a whole bunch of different ways, which I think is one reason it's a really popular guide fly. Just realized I forgot to do this. Come on. Anyway, it's a really popular guide fly. Why am I struggling here to get this rabbit or these rubber legs split? Really popular guide fly because you can fish it a whole bunch of different ways. You could certainly fish it as a streamer, with a sink tip or whatever. Probably more popular actually fished as a nymph, under an indicator. So if it drags, it's not a problem, but if it's dead drifting, it's not a problem. Usually fish that in conjunction with a second fly, almost certainly a smaller nymph. But pretty cool fly. I think it'd work for a lot of different species, and that's awfully close to being the quote-unquote standard Zirdle, which I don't think is on YouTube at this point otherwise. As always, thanks for watching, and if you have any comments or questions or would like to request a fly, feel free to use the comment box below. And my guiding season's well underway here in Montana, so if you'd like to go fishing with me, let me know. Got a lot of good fishing coming up, and pretty fully booked already for the summer, so looking forward to a busy season. Have a good week.